Hello and welcome to the Game Dev London podcast, a community of amazing people who love to talk about and sharing their love of the details behind making games, whether or not they're actually based in London. And I'm very delighted to be joined by now, I think your title is now CEO of Game Dev London, and I'm going to bring you on screen any second now. Stuart De Ville, great seeing you as always. So, it's a funny old thing. We're now in the new year. This is my first podcast of the year. I don't know where you are. I think we had one that was recorded prior to blah blah blah. So we have a kind of opportunity here to wrap up where we are and look at where we're going. And I think from what we were talking about earlier, we had this kind of like crazy idea that we want to have maybe if this works out, if you like this format, we want to try and see if we can talk a little bit about strategy and see how that evolves over the year. So, Stuart, I mean, does that make sense to you? Is that kind of where you'd like to take this?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing for us to talk about because game dev strategy comes in so many different ways for us as game developers. You've got like the strategy of what are you personally doing as a developer? You've got the strategy of like how you might form a team. You've got the strategy of what you're going to do with your game, strategy for what you're going to do for your release, strategy for what you're going to do for your studio long term. So I think, yeah, the game dev strategies is going to be could be a really cool little series.
Well, let's see how it goes. I mean,
Yeah.
for those of you who don't know, I've been interested in the strategy behind games for a very long time. Yes, I'm old, hence the greyness. But it's more that this happens to be the 10th anniversary of me writing this thing. So I thought, in the context of that, it probably makes sense to sort of see if any of this stuff stands up, whether where we are in general. But also, I think it's much more interesting to think about. We often go into game development wanting to make the game, and I don't think that the last year has not been great, has it? Let's face it.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen a time in the industry where we've had so many redundancies, we had so many issues and structural problems. We haven't had a decline in the same level. I mean, bear in mind this is in the context of for the industry as a whole, and was don't mean this in a this could get taken out of context. I don't mean this in a way. The COVID era was terrible for a lot of people. However, for an industry, what do people reach for when they're having a terrible time? It is quite often games. So from an
Yeah.
industry point of view, we did okay. And I don't mean that in a profiteering way. We
Mm.
provided a necessary form of escape and enjoyment. But with every positive that comes in that context, the negative is going to come later because at the end of the day, people are going to get back to their normal lives. And we saw that in abundance, I think.
Yeah.
So what I'm keen to do is I think that this is my hypothesis. Let's see what you think about it. I think that what always seems to happen when you have a big crash like this, we have a lot of studios collapsing, a lot of their really big talent that moves on wants to form their own studio. And that can go well and that can go badly. Do you think that makes sense? Is that something that you see being possible?
Yeah. So I mean, I've been seeing it a lot already, actually, like on LinkedIn and stuff. There's a lot of people out there who are kind of openly banging this drum about yes, this is all really hard times, but yes, there's lots of opportunities, and there's a lot of people who are just saying, take this opportunity, while you've been set loose on the world to make a game, make the game you always want, or and a lot of people think to just start your own studio, which I do think is cool. And I do try to be the not the counterpoint, but like the balancing point for that conversation, because there's a lot to consider before you even. Well, you'll know very well. Like there is and there isn't a lot to consider. Like you could just dive in head first, and
Oh,
whether you do your homework, you're still going to get hit by lots of hiccups.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think there's a huge amount to think of. So we do some of the things that we do on the side, if you like, as well as sort of publishing, is try and run a game accelerating program with a team called Indie Lab. And I mean, we've helped out a bunch of studios and universities and done lectures on this kind of stuff. But I kind of come at it from a kind of I suppose a mini or even a micro MBA kind of way of looking at it. So I'm looking at it as games as a business. Why? Because I think that there are already amazingly talented creative people out there. I don't need to lecture them most of the time on how to be more creative, although I've done a bit of that too.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's getting them to work out what the sausage factory is. And
Mm.
I don't mean that sounds derogatory, and it's not. Games are never sausage factories. However, if you don't build a gourmet sausage factory for your gourmet game, you're not going to be able to do it in a consistent, repeatable way. And guess what? Your first game is not going to work. I mean, I used to think it was like 1 in 10 games succeeded, maybe 2 in 10. I've had other friends of mine tell
Yeah.
me that it's 1 in 20. And again, the thing in my head is, if we don't take a serious look at what we're trying to do, if we're going to make something, we're either going to lose a lot of our own money, or we're going to lose a lot of our
Mhm.
friends' money, or we're going to lose a lot of our investors' money, and we don't want to do that. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, we want to make something that players want. I mean, does that make sense to you? Does that resonate with you?
Yeah. I mean, I also like to consider the fact that not everyone actually does come into games because they want to make money and they want to make a company. A lot of people come into games because they enjoy the craft of making games, and
Absolutely.
and that's totally legit. But I think that if you're coming into it with this mindset that you want to make money, then you really do need to take it a lot more seriously and do a lot more homework.
Yeah, I mean, don't I think there's some interesting stuff. I mean, I know a couple of teams that we've been kind of talking to that managed to get a few grants. And the UK Games Fund, obviously. There's a
Mhm.
bunch of other the Arts Council stuff can often work, but we're talking about very small amounts of money now. Okay, 25K to an individual isn't a small amount of money for a lot of people, but if you're going to make a game, that disappears incredibly fast. I mean,
Oh yeah.
we're not talking, about just spending money on people, but the idea of hosting a server, the idea of, even if you're not using a server-based game, if you're paying for a game engine, you're paying for software tools, you're paying for a machine to build it on, that money is almost negligible. But we don't have the equivalent of the indie band going down the pub for an open mic session. We don't have that option. If you're going to make a game, I think you've got to make a game, and then making a game requires something else. And my goodness, do I wish I could sit there and just make the games I have in my head, but I can't. I can't because mortgage, blah 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 blah.
Mhm.
What do you think is the sort of? I mean, if you are a new person on the block, how would you currently encourage somebody to think about this wonderful game idea they've got and how they make that reality?
Wow. um, so this
Or
actually
if
leans
it's
in.
easier, say what you don't do. I don't mind either way. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm actually like a great proponent of not following someone's recipe for success, but avoiding someone's recipe for failure. Um,
Yeah.
I'm actually with us both being at PG Connects later in January. My talk is on exactly that. But I
Handy.
think that yeah, I think that this kind of ties into what we were saying about just before we hit the record button, where like if you are just starting out, there's a real temptation to look at um, all of the videos that are out there, people with successful devlogs and um, all of these inspiring journeys, and there's although a solo developer is a unicorn, there's been enough of them over a long enough period of time that it seems like a fully viable path through game development. And while it is, because you're keeping what would you say? You're keeping like costs down across the board with it just being you, and also decision making is super quick and easy. You haven't got to, test anything with a team. But the downside is everything else, which is that I feel like, especially right now, um, with us all being mental health conscious, that being a solo dev when you don't have all of the necessary skills to do it alone is a recipe for burnout. And and there's so many people out there, very similar boat to yourself as a developer, where they're trying to get into the industry, or they're trying to make, they've got ideas, or they've got capabilities for making a game, but they don't have the skill set that you have. That it's really easy, relatively easy, to find a community of these people and connect with them and form a small team. Or like I've said before, you could just grab two of your friends, if they're, because ordinarily if you have this as an interest, your friends are similarly interested, and so you could just form a small team of three, and already you're putting yourself in a better position for making that game that you want to make, making it without all of the weight of the mental exhaustion that comes with it. Um, like the main upside of having even a small team is that you share both the lows and highs. So you all of these moments where like a solo developer can be like, oh, this is so cool. Oh, there's no one here to share it with.
Yeah.
Or like, oh my God, this is so hard. Like I've just been bashing my head for a week, and they've got no one to turn to and be like, the thing that we love to do with rubber ducking, I absolutely do with my team all the time. I'm just like, oh, this, I don't know what we're going to do about this, and they'll go, maybe that, and I go, oh yeah, of course, because you're so in the reeds, you just can't see.
But
So
let me
that's like my
yeah,
key thing here, basically, is
yeah.
if you can, and if you don't have to, then don't do it alone.
I want to. I mean, I agree with you. By the way, I just want
Mm,
to chuck in a few things because I think people will see that and they'll think, "Oh, okay, I'll just go and find a bunch of my mates. We'll go do stuff and it'll be fine." I think that there's also, unless everybody goes in with the same level of understanding of risk, of reward, of
mm,
grit, um, all of these things, because you will lose your friends when you find out that they can't do the job anymore. Even if you go in with the best possible, I've had this happen to me recently, well, relatively recently. A friend of mine was struggling with their mental health. They could
mhm,
not do their job anymore. I had to let them go. Not because I didn't want to support them, far from it. I absolutely, and we did everything we physically could. But there comes a point where you functionally can't continue.
mm,
And at that point, you know, that should theoretically say, okay, it's fine, stop working out, so we'll do it. But it's never that easy when you're dealing with real people. I
yeah,
think being an entrepreneur is one of the hardest things I've ever done
yeah,
because not because of the like the work is fine, but it's there's never a point when you're not responsible.
yeah,
There's never a point where you can just leave it. And I think that that realization, if you want to make a studio, I think you've actually got to ask yourself first is, do I have that in me? Now, I don't want to put people off. Absolutely don't want to put people off. It's more that I want you to step forward saying, yes, this is going to be hard. Yes, this is going to be involving things which are going to be emotionally complicated, but I'm going in with my eyes open.
yeah,
Does that make? I
yeah,
mean, do you feel that? I mean, again, I'm saying this because I see a lot of people who go in who have rose tinted glasses about the whole process. Oh, make sure everything will be fine. I'm going to be Rami or Mike Bithell, and everything will be
yeah,
wonderful,
yeah,
and that they aren't going to because it wasn't for those guys. It hasn't always been wonderful. I mean, they've done a fucking amazing job. Don't get me wrong, and I love them to bits. I mean, how many people can be successful and not be Actually, I know quite a lot of them. If I think about, like, you think about people like Sean at Hutch. You think about people like Paul at Mediatonic. You think about people like um, John and Simon at Space Ape. There are so many people out there who built amazing game studios who haven't lost that emotional connection. I think it's because they went in with their eyes open
Yeah.
and an intent to do something that as a business, not just as a here's a good game.
Yeah. I think that I was really lucky that my first studio failed
Mm,
because um, I, for 5 years of running that studio, I didn't notice the building pressure and that weight of responsibility that in the early days was like super carefree, and it is so incremental that by the end of those 5 years, when I had to let go of everything, there was this weird 2 week period where I was devastated that it had gone, but this massive, massive feeling of relief,
yeah.
and I was so relaxed, and
Mm,
I had to seriously sit down after I'd had a chat with someone about, because initially I just thought that I had blown it and I was out and I was done. And I think I've mentioned before, I spoke to an investor friend of mine and they were like, no, you're actually more investable because you're not going to make those mistakes again. You're a safer bet for an investor. And with that bit of knowledge, I was like, okay, so I can start again. Do I start again? Because I now know that yeah, the early days are going to be fairly light and breezy. It's all quite fun. You're figuring things out and all of this stuff. And yes, I'm now backed with this experience, but still along the way, this weight of responsibility is going to get heavier, and there will be another point at which everything's going really well, everything's really successful. I've got like a really good team, and the threat of there something being like the threat of something big or something unknown that would wipe us out is always going to be somewhere in my mind. So, which which is kind of good because you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna, you're mentally
Well, you're
prepared
looking
for
for it. You're
almost.
trying paying attention. Yeah.
But at the same time, um, during the time where that's not happening and it's not even in the bushes, you still have the fear of it. So like, yeah, so I had to seriously consider whether or not I was going to try again, and
Mm.
obviously I decided that I was going to try again. And the thing is,
Yeah.
it has been absolutely amazing. Um, we've done it within the space of 1 year. In fact, I think within this first 6 months, we had done what I had been trying to do over the course of 5 years. Like everything has just been so much smoother in
Mm.
in such an insane way. Um,
So let's go. Let's dive into that a little bit. So again, because I'm trying to think about parallels that
mm,
can help people who are starting out and they're going to start a new team. They're looking what are they looking for? Are they looking for business partners? So for my mind, it always goes back to that cliche: you need a hipster, a hacker, and a hustler. And I kind
nice.
of like those kind of phrases.
Yeah.
I got it from I was at a talk that was at an event in Ottawa back in, oh goodness me, it must have been 10 years ago. Actually, it would have been 2014 because it was it was when my book came out. And this sort of talk really kind of struck me because you think about the hipster, by the hipster they mean somebody who's got the creative juices. And usually it's the artist side of thing or
Yeah.
the design side of thing. You've then got the hacker, the person the person who's going to actually build the thing, and usually you need a different person from the artist to be the creator. Not everybody is going to get away with the crappy art of a Minecraft. I know people love Minecraft, absolutely, but it exists like that because that was the art he could do,
Yeah.
and that's okay. And he made that a strength, and that's fine. But generally, we're not trying to do that. Generally, we're trying to have a creative, engine person, as in a personality, who can think about the mechanics and the art and the story of the experience, and the functional person who's going to make that work. But I think you also need the person, and the hustler to me is a combination of kind of developing the business, raising the money, but also keeping the train on the rails.
Mm.
And I think that to me is the heart and the minimum of the experience. But do they have to be partners? And if they're not, what's the consequences? Could they be employees? If they are, what's the consequences? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. And I really relate to that format because I was being called a hipster from from the day hipsters came about. I've
Well, you
obviously
used to
cut.
have the hair for
Yeah, I've
it.
obviously cut my hair, and I don't have
Yeah.
the twirly beard mustache anymore.
Mm.
But yeah, so
Same.
it's it's something that, so with my first studio, for the longest time it was me at the helm, and everyone else that I worked with was like friends and or friends and or like contract based, like freelancing, working with me. And it wasn't until God, probably after my first year of just like trying to manage my team solo that I decided I was going to bring in um, a co-founder. I also learned that having a co-founder makes you more of a stable investment, so that kind of tied into
Yeah.
it. And then um, with my first team, I just bloated. I bloated the team. It was way too big.
Mm.
But this time round, we're forming the second studio. I considered it from the get go that if I'm creating a new studio, a new startup, then I need this crack core team. And for me, it was a team of 3. And I decided, fairly early on, that core team, we all 3 of us would be co-founders,
Mm.
co-founder slash director slash
Mm.
insert top titles here. And part of that is I wanted to make sure that I had firstly, really skilled, really skilled people, and people that I had strong relationships with, that I trust, and that I trust more than I trust them more than I have a friendship with them. So
Yeah.
we are all friends. We are all cool. We've known each other for like a fair amount of time. But above everything else, I trust them, and we had some. I made sure that we had and we still do have very difficult conversations. All of those conversations that if you don't have them now, at any point down the line, it could just be the bomb that explodes everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I've got so many stories around that.
Yeah.
I, actually, I will talk about it because I got told off because people thought I was being mean. I wasn't. James Cox and I, old mate of mine, and we used to work at Sony together. He was in charge of the dev team. I was in charge of the requirements, and we used to have stand-up rows. And then people were confused because we'd then go and have lunch and talk about kids together. And the point is that this is about having a relationship with somebody where we needed to get the job done. Unless we actually dealt with the issues and the consequences and the process, we wouldn't get the requirements, wouldn't get the deliverables that could be done. And if I didn't push the boundaries on them to do more, then we wouldn't get as much for the player as we would want. And it was amazing, it's amazing kind of describing it. But the phrase that I think I've forgotten who came up with this, but I loved it, which was the phrase opinions strongly felt but loosely held.
Yeah.
And I think if you haven't got a professional relationship with your business partners or a partner, in my case I have a single business partner, Ella, and we have the ability to be able to have a, you know, very intense conversation, knowing at the end of the day, we both want the best for each other and we
Mhm.
want the best for the company. And the thing that matters in this conversation is that we get the right solution.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. And finding business partners, I think you've got to be able to know that you can have, even if they're friends, you can have a different relationship with a separate relationship with them, where you can be as earnest as you need to be, without fear or favor. Is that fair?
Yeah. I literally like I've had so many conversations with both Roxanne and Gianni
Mm.
where um not and we're all pretty good at this actually, where they because they'll gingerly start out with, so you know, I might keep this to myself, and I always go, no, 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 100%. Tell me exactly whatever the hell it is. I'd rather know whatever it is you're feeling or thinking, and um, I can promise you that I won't take offense long term. Like I might get the ego kick like initially and be like, oh no, that's such a painful thing to hear. um, but really, I'd rather have that and especially because I'm aware that we have our own biases, we have our own blind spots, and if I'm just like toddling along with something and I don't have someone who can come to me and go, that's probably a mistake or that's probably not right, um, then it's just going to stay there. And
I don't
yeah,
know what you
it
mean.
will be
I'm
the thing.
perfectly correct about everything all of the time.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to pursue this a little further because I had
Yeah.
this thesis, which is that it's not just about, and this doesn't just apply to business partners. I think business partners is a really important thing. I think, like you said earlier, the importance and the significance of having somebody to bounce off is on interesting. I remember talking to Mike's business partner, and he's amazing. I mean, just you look at those kind of experiences, and you think about how those experiences, where you having something to bounce off of dramatically improves your ability to get a better result, because two opinions, two perspectives is significantly better. Three perspectives gives you more, but there is a diminishing return
Yeah.
on those. And I think that's why we get to the stage where hierarchy matters. But at the end of the day, pull all that together. We'll talk after. Let's talk about like the challenges of multiple people later. But for now, what
Hmm.
I want to talk about is, I think one of the crucial things about the term culture that folks like Ilka talk about very positively. Ilka Penana, that is the superstar. Um, about needing to set up culture at the start. The reason I agree with them, I think, is because I think a company is a group of people on a common endeavor.
Hmm.
And if you haven't got your partners and your staff and your team aren't having a common shared objective that is completely known and understood, you're not going to have a successful outcome.
Yeah.
Even if you have all that, you're not necessarily going to have a successful outcome
Hmm.
either. But that's a different subject.
Yeah.
But I think, this is, to me. How do you look at, in your way you're setting up your team, or where you have
Hmm.
set up your team? How do you ensure that you are on a common journey? How you ensure you're all heading for the same goal?
I think we personally do it in a number of ways. Um, the first of which is um, just open and honest and continual conversation
Mm.
that like we're just always talking about it. Um, and um, what would I say the second part was? Immediately forgets. And the yeah, the other part is that um, we we set it up as like a part of each process has this kind of feedback pushback um, kind of built into it. I don't think that there's any. There's only a few decisions that don't go out to the whole team, as in beyond the three leads, the senior team. Every Almost everything we share amongst ourselves. In fact, we normally share amongst ourselves first, so that we're not just bombarding the team with everything always.
Well, also, you don't want to get in the boating with both ways problem, where you
Yes.
haven't agreed the thing that you'd like to do before you then
Yeah.
get the team to decide which one it is you do.
Yeah. So normally we end up like bringing something to the team that is, hey, out of these 2 or 3 things, what do you like? What do you think? As opposed to broad scale, just give me your thoughts on this. Also, I think that is really hard for anyone anyway, to be like, especially when it comes to like the bigger decisions that you're trying to make as a company, to just kind of go, what do you think, to like any member of your team, and just have them go, a million things, I don't know. So it's definitely a lot better if you've, internally, amongst your
Yeah, I
small
mean,
team.
for us, we've got a whole bunch of things we try and put in place. So, first thing is, so for example, we're going to take on a game, then we get everyone to play it, and if there's an objection, we don't take the game on. So, because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that the team are behind the game. That doesn't mean they have to all love it to the same
Mm,
level,
yeah.
but if they've got a fundamental issue with it, then that's a litmus test for us anyway. And at the same time, it allows us to say, yeah, okay, this game is good enough for us to continue. The other thing we try and do, and I get, because I think this isn't just a one-off thing. You know, once you get started, I think you have to continue it, and actually, actions are much more influential than just talking about it. I think, you know, one of the things we try to, we haven't always been done this well, to be honest, but what we try to do is have, you know, every couple of months, every 3 months, a strategy meeting where we take a particular part of the business and we basically do a kind of pre-mortem on, you know, or sometimes a post-mortem,
Mm,
where we review. We want to do this thing. How does should that thing work? Who does this? Who does that? Who does this? Who does that? Why should that be that? Who's get what skill set's missing from this? And getting the team to participate in those conversations, actually actively be part of developing that process,
mm,
means that we actually get much better buy-in. And don't get me wrong, the fact that we've got, you know, subject matter experts like myself and also, you know, our producer, our designer, you know, these are all subject matter experts, able to take the lead on those processes, means that they're not going to just go off into wild, you know, craziness. They'll always be grounded in what is workable. But I think that process of feeling like you're part of that decision, you're part of the strategy, I think it's a really important part. So I think taking this back to people,
mm,
if we're taking, you know, what we're saying here is if we're going to pick up a team, I think what we're saying is that you need to think about how do you build structure where you've got the right people to bounce your ideas off and to do the technical work.
yeah.
You've got the hipster, and that could be an individual or a team. You've got the hacker, that could be an individual or a team. You've got the hustler, that could again be an individual or a team. But you've got those core, that triumvirate um, of momentum in the
Mm,
business, all talking to each other. To your point,
yeah.
but also having an opportunity to question what we're doing on a regular basis. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is, for me, it's like one of the most valuable things that we have, is that
Mm,
ability to, not only have those conversations, but there's always a place for pushback.
mm,
um, because as much as like having a hierarchy structure where you can have, um, like the someone who has like the final say, the final veto, whatever, um, if that person isn't open to, people just going, I don't think that's right, I don't think that's the thing, um, then you start to just embed one person's ideology, and
mm.
that's seemingly always a recipe for failure.
And it's hard. I mean, I had a point where people coming in didn't know that it was okay to tell me to, you know, shut up and get on with things.
That is also difficult. Yeah.
You know, to question, you know, because here's the stupid guy in the hat they've seen on stage doing all this stuff, talking about all this stuff, must know everything. Everything he said must be right. No, no. You need to
Yeah.
tell me you disagree. And
There's also a reason why when we do our talks, we have a Q&A.
yeah, to be honest, the reason I do the talks is to make sure that I'm saying things that are still correct,
Yeah.
because I want to be held up to account.
Mm.
What I love about hosting sessions, particularly at someone like you mentioned Pocket Gamer, I will be at Pocket Gamer, I will be hosting a bunch of things. The reason I love that so much is because I get to sit in a room with the world experts, and I
Mm.
get to ride off their coattails, and I get to ask them the questions, and I get to, when I don't agree, because I might have some experience of myself, I like to think I am a, expert, subject expert in my own right. I can challenge in a way that hopefully doesn't come across as I'm a git,
Mm.
but more that I want to give them the opportunity to say, yes, that's all right, but actually, this is the new thing. This is the interesting thing. This is
Mm.
the thing that you've missed. That's, to me, that's, I love that. Absolutely adore that. Anyway, back to the point here. So I think what we're saying here is that there's a challenging time that we've had overall, but
Yeah.
there are some things that we think, from our experience, are useful if you're going to set up a studio. And this triumvirate of hipster, hacker, and hustler is a one way of looking at that. But
Mhm.
communication is probably the more central kind of concept. That I said I'd come back to this. Let's talk about the challenges of people, because
Mm.
um, people are terrible, but they're also wonderful. And um, again, this I don't want to. So easy to get misquoted on these things, but I want to try and get across is that human beings are complicated,
Mhm. Yes.
and if someone is feeling vulnerable or has had a context of vulnerability, if somebody has been bullied, for example, I had been bullied several times when I was at telcos. I've talked about it a few times.
Mhm.
The you come in with baggage, and how do you deal with that baggage? How do you find a way to create space so that you can actually get the job done?
Yeah, the people problem is it's a tricky one. I mean, so I'm like openly optimistic, and I believe that everyone on balance is probably just trying to do the best they can and trying to
Yeah,
just get on with their lives. And like you say, a lot of people are dealing with, everyone's got their own baggage that they're trying to deal with. And as much as possible, really, I try to talk to anyone who works with me on any level um, about those things. Like, a lot of people are like, "Oh, that stuff isn't for the office." Like, don't. But if you don't bring it into the office, then really, it's something. It's not like it's not there. It is there. It's affecting these people. Um, and if you don't know what it is, then you're gonna you're gonna make a whole bunch of assumptions,
yeah,
and you're gonna be like, "This person just isn't pulling their weight." Um, and you might have had you might have even had like a couple of conversations with them where you've been like, hey, so need to pick up the pace a bit, and they're like, yeah, no, gotcha, yeah, I know, I'm on it, and you go, okay, cool. But if you actually stop and try and have people to people conversations, um like you would with a friend, where you'd say, hey, what's up? Like, don't even talk about, like, most of the time I don't talk about work. A lot of the time I do just talk to people. Like, I feel like it's better to really get to know the people,
mm,
especially that you're working with, um, so that, yeah, they know that they can come to you and they can say, look, this is going on. Even if they're not able to give you like great grainy detail, they can at least say to you, yeah, I've got like a lot going on at home, or I've got a lot going on in my life, or like my cat just died, like whatever it is. Um, as if they know that they can actually talk to you about that stuff, and that you're not going to go, well, you've got work to do. um, what I tend to find is, and I have this from my own perspective, when I've been treated that way, I'm more inclined to kind of find a way to continue to be productive and work, knowing that I can still like openly talk about I'm really struggling. This might take me like an extra week. This might take me an extra couple of hours, or whatever the situation that I feel I'm capable of doing. And yeah, so to be able to have that from your people means that your retention is going to be better. And while people always go, "Oh, retention is such a why do you care about retention?" Two reasons, and it's not really about, like, yes, it's useful for your company if one person can just stay doing the job that they're doing, but it's useful for that person. Like they don't want to be hopping from studio to studio more often than not. They have like career plans, and whatever they're dealing with in that moment, they're probably not even thinking about their career in that moment because they've got this weight of stuff around them. And you don't want to have that derail someone just because you didn't have a conversation with them. So yeah,
Well,
the
this
people
actually
thing.
goes back to I was watching some YouTube thing where Costco apparently has amazing retention. They pay significantly above. This is in the US. I don't know what they'd like in the UK.
I can tell you, I
And
used to work there. But go on.
yeah, but apparently they pay much higher than the usual retail rate.
Mm-hmm.
They have much longer retention. They invest in their staff. They do training, although they say they could do better with training, and they make billions of dollars. So there is a company that isn't trapped in the cycle of the quarterly release, that when faced with problems builds their own stuff and invests in their team, and does. I don't know. You can quite compare them to an Amazon, but it's a very different business model,
Mm-hmm.
which shows you can be. I don't know how ethical they are. I hope they're ethical. From that thing I saw, they seem to be, but can invest in people, and what saves them is that they don't have to constantly hire,
Yeah.
and that means they don't have the cost of constantly hiring, and they don't have the cost of having to find people who have the right level of training because they train the people, and those people who feel invested in stay and work harder. I mean, it seemed to me it's
Yeah.
so patently obvious. I mean, again, not I want to particularly talk about Costco. Not I'm against it, but I mean, however true that is or not, I genuinely think that. In fact, we have this principle inside with us, which is we do a personal development plan, and the idea is that we want to work out what it is for you, for your career, but also for this job.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. It's not just about whether you stay with us forever or if you move on. The trouble is, and again, going back to the negatives, the complications, the issues, is that not generally, but occasionally in my career, I have encountered people who are less than earnest in the way that they deal with their managers, and
Mm-hmm.
particularly middle managers who I've been subject to or I've had working for me, who are great at managing up and terrible at managing down.
Mm.
And that can be insidious because there can be this again is why I think having the ability for everybody to share and communicate, everybody to be able to participate and own the decisions is so important, because when you have somebody who is not necessarily a good actor,
Yeah.
how do you find that out? And I
Mm.
think if you're not going into your new startup thinking about, okay, how do I make sure that I can pay attention. And don't get me wrong, I've screwed up myself as well. I've not given somebody the training and support they needed, and I had to let them go because they made some bad mistakes,
Mm.
mistakes that could have cost us very badly. And I feel terrible that I did not pick up on that earlier. But again, this is why I think it's important that as somebody going into a role, you have to take on a responsibility for them and a responsibility um, to pay attention to how they're actually engaging with everybody around them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think this is to your point about like when you're starting out, a lot of people think, I'm going to make this game.
Hmm.
And this is especially true when you're forming a team. What you absolutely have to think about is the fact that you're about to be a leader. You're
Yeah,
about to lead people. You're not like, yes, it's collaborative, but and this is especially true if you're coming to the table with the original game idea.
yeah.
Um, you're you're solely responsible for leading that team. And while there's a lot that can be um, forgiven for if you have really skilled people um, that and if you have really good people that don't need a lot of leading, then I mean that in the early days of a startup, that's probably really dangerous anyway.
Oh, but it's also
But
necessary to have people who can
yeah,
just do their job.
yeah,
I think is actually necessary because a startup doesn't have any room for um, X. We don't have room to train people
mm,
properly. We try to. Don't get me wrong. I try to,
yeah,
but there's not much give. I think that's the problem.
yeah. I try. I'm quite fortunate that I have done so many different things over such a long period of time that I can give most of my team as much of my time as possible when it comes to um, areas where they're like, I don't know how to do this or I've not done this before. Um, and normally I can have like at least a couple of conversations with them that are based on like, well, this is what I would do, this is how I would do it, or even this is what I usually do because I was doing it before I brought you in, which is really the ideal situation.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, um, that I'm quite lucky in that respect. But I think if you are bringing in people, um, especially like you say at this early stage, you do need to have a certain level of confidence on their skill set, and then it's just
So
a case of where do you find that proof.
yeah,
Hopefully they've
I
got it.
think what I think we're saying is um, we need to find the right people to work with that we can build professional relationships with, whether we have the friend relationship or not. That we have open communication and we have a clear, common goal, and that we're paying attention because there's risks at the end of the day where we might end up finding out that unfortunately somebody isn't the good actor we had hoped they were.
Hmm.
These things happen, and there might be all sorts of reasons why that's the case. Whether it's, like I said earlier, that some mental health issue, or merely different objectives. At the end of the day, I mean, this is the end of the day.
Hmm.
A lot of people are just wanting to make their career, and a specific game, specific company isn't really necessarily an essential part of that.
Yeah.
Um, so, but I think there's another aspect to that, which is at the end of the day, we are constrained by cash. And at what stage do you start hiring people? I mean, for example, you know, we've got to pay people. You've got
Hmm.
people's work is professional. Professional work requires payment, and in a startup context, you don't always have the luxury of being able to pay the market norm, whatever the market norm is. I don't think you should pay people. Well, it's so difficult. You. I think,
Especially right now, like
yeah,
um, so, and this is um, part of the COVID hangover, right? Is that during that time, like you say, everyone was at home, everyone was playing games.
yeah,
Games sales went through the roof.
yeah,
Investment in games went through the roof,
yeah.
and I think not enough people looked at that situation and thought to themselves, "This isn't going to become the base norm. There is going to be a dropout."
Hang on, yeah,
And that's obviously what's happened to us. Investment hasn't dried up, but a lot of
a lot of stuff.
got scared, and which is natural.
And
And I think
it's not just game. It's not just
yeah,
the games industry context. I mean,
no,
just
no,
for background context,
yeah,
um, post IDFA. So when Apple removed the IDFA, so the ID for advertisers, that had an impact on the way they chose to do it. Had an impact on the amount of data that was available, and therefore targeting of ads became more complicated. And that's just not just ads in games, but also ads generally.
Yeah.
For finding audiences generally became more expensive. At the same time, you had um, lots of increase in other areas of privacy control, which again, all good stuff, but again has a downward pressure on the cost of ads and the inability, difficulty of finding people, which means that the cost of acquisition of games in general will go up significantly. All of which not that long after COVID, not long before even. On top of that, we've had the Ukraine situation, which has
Hmm.
had a dramatic impact on people's, on the economy in general. We've had in the UK in particular the hangover post Brexit, which has obviously also had a hangover effect on our contextual investment opportunity, downward in my opinion. But I'm not going to get into that debate. And then on top of that, you've had now the Israel Hamas situation, which is further depressed. So the reason I'm saying is that we had a situation which meant that games is always going to have a bit of a hard time.
Yeah.
But we're in a global context where everybody's having a hard time, and oil price issues, again, all having a knock-on effect
Yeah.
on a hard time, on a hard time, on a hard time. Let's not even get started with the political kind of contexts around that as well.
Yeah.
So, no wonder we are in a situation where a lot of studios have let a lot of people go, more than I remember in my career.
Mm. Yeah, and so yeah, this is what we're saying, right? Is that um, when you start a startup, you want to pay people.
Yeah,
Right now, um, that is ridiculously hard, which
yeah,
means that if you are starting out right now and you want to form a small team, you your small core team needs to have a very serious and hard conversation about the fact that your your core team will all be investing in the studio, um, maybe not financially, but definitely with time and energy for a certain length of time until you can produce something tasty enough to stick on a hook and swing around into the industry and see if you can get investors and publishers to go, oh yeah, I think you've got something there. I think I can see how that can go from what you've got here to something that can make money, and get support along the way to do that. So in this early startup stage, I don't think enough people realize that a phenomenal amount of startups actually start with zero cash.
yeah.
Um, if you've got if you're financially backed at the start, congratulations. um,
Well,
and in
I,
fact, what I've seen is most of those cases, someone and normally the creator or founder of the first creator founder of the studio has they're financially backing themselves. They
yeah.
maybe they've spent like 7 years accruing cash and they've gone, this is what
Or
this was
they're
for.
working as a consultant or other sort of work for hire work, and they're putting that work for hire work into the business in general.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll tell you what, I think we're at a stage now where, I think this, what I'd summarize this in is that at the end of the day, whoever you're going to start your business with, in terms of business partners or people who are going to build and bring into the team, you've got to have a serious conversation with them about their appetite for risk. You've got
Hmm.
to understand what they are willing and able to do and respect that, but don't forget it. I think that's the thing. It's very easy to forget that appetite for risk. And I think if I think if there's anything to sum up what we're talking about, it's, for me, it's about, if you're forming a team, you need to find the people with the skills that fill the needs, that triumvirate of the hipster, the hacker, and the hustler. But you have to know what their appetite for risk is. And if you don't know that, you're not going to be able to get off at day one. And I think what we should do, if people enjoy this kind of conversation,
Hmm.
is to next time, let's talk about where that money comes from. Let's talk about the work for hire. Let's talk about the how you get your investment. Let's talk about grants and see where that takes us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that sounds good to me. So, audience, let us know.
Let us know. I mean, if you're really serious about getting on with making your own studio, I mean, these are the fundamental questions that will drive you before you even get to think about the creative aspects, the joyful, juicy bits.
Mm.
So please let us know. Send us, email, join our Discord. There is a Discord. Come and chat with us about it. If you have different views, if you think we missed something massive about how we look at the kind of people we want to have inside the team, if you think that we should be thinking more about the skill set rather than the connection with those people, that's great. Tell us what you think. We're very open. Again, that's the whole point of having a community like Game Dev London, is because we want to share and learn and engage with each other. So please like, subscribe, and do all the usual stuff that you do with a podcast. And before we close off, Stuart, do you have any kind of things you want to tell people that you're up to next, or how people can get in hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, if depending on when you're listening to this, if it's still pre-January 22nd, 2024, then I and you, I believe, will be. Well, actually, I know you and I will both be at PGC Connects, and I'm giving a talk, so feel free to come along and listen to me waffle if you haven't had enough already. If you're looking to have a chat with me, I'm easily found. You can at Stuart De Ville on any platform, pretty much. And if you're really struggling, just Google Stuart De Ville, and I'm everywhere on the web, so you easily found. And
Yeah.
yeah, and as you were saying, if you do want to join the Games of London Discord, just go to gamedev.london/join. Takes you straight into the Discord, and you can talk to us all there.
Absolutely, and I can be found on most platforms. Yes, I'm still on X. I don't know why, but I can't seem to find somewhere else I can do what I used to do. Anyway, I'm at
Threads is quite good.
Athanasius. Which one? Sorry,
Threads.
Threads. I haven't. It hasn't gelled with me. I don't know why. Anyway, I'm at
Yeah.
Athanasius on almost everything. Or you can Stuart said, you can Google me, Oscar Clark Games. I'm not the Canadian cyclist, and I'm not the American guitarist. But you can generally find the hat everywhere. On that note, thank you very much, one and all. And for those of you who are watching this before the end of January, we'll see you at PGC. And if you're not afterwards, we'll see you at some other venue shortly. Anyway, thank you very much, folks. And this has been your Game Dev London podcast.